Nobody noticed Yu Seo Yeon, and that was exactly how she wanted it. She sat in the back corner of every classroom at Hanyang University, wearing oversized glasses that covered half her face and clothes that made her blend into the walls like a shadow. And when professors called attendance, they often had to call her name twice because they forgot she was Teresio Yuan was 22 years old, a senior majoring in library science, and she had perfected the art of being invisible for years now. And it served her well in ways that nobody could ever imagine on this particular Monday morning. She sat alone in the university cafeteria, eating her lunch of rice and vegetables, and her eyes moved slowly across the room, tracking every exit, every face, every potential threat. And this was a habit she could not break, even if she tried. A tray slammed down on the table across from her, and she looked up to see a young man with a bright smile and curious eyes staring at her with interest that made her uncomfortable. "Hey, I am Kang Ji-ho," he said cheerfully. "I just transferred here from Yonsei, and I noticed you always eat alone. So I thought maybe you could use some company." Seo Yin lowered her eyes back to her food and spoke in a voice so soft that Ji-ho had to lean forward to hear her. "Thank you for your kindness, but I prefer to eat alone," she said, and her tone was polite but final. Like a door closing gently but firmly, Zhou should have walked away. But something about this girl made him curious, and he could not explain why. But he felt like there was more to her than the shy bookworm image she presented to the world. "Okay, I understand," he said, standing up with his tray. "But if you ever change your mind, I sit over there by the window every day." She did not respond, and he walked away feeling strange, like he had just tried to pet a cat that was actually a tiger in disguise over the next few weeks. Ji-ho could not stop noticing Seo Yeon, and the more he watched her, the more questions filled his mind like water filling a cup. He noticed that she had faint scars on her hands, thin white lines that looked like they came from knives or broken glass, and when he asked a classmate about them, nobody had ever noticed before he noticed that her eyes were never still, always moving, always watching, always tracking people as they moved through rooms like a predator watching prey from the tall grass. He noticed that she always sat with her back against the wall, never with her back to a door or window, and this was a habit that soldiers and police officers often had according to movies he had watched. He noticed that despite her thin and fragile appearance, she moved with a certain grace that suggested hidden strength, like a dancer or martial artist who had trained for many years. One night, Ji-ho was walking back to his dormitory after studying late at the library, and the clock had just passed 2 in the morning when he saw a figure moving across the dark campus grounds. It was Seo Yeon, but she looked completely different now. Her glasses were gone, and her hair was pulled back tight, and she wore all black clothing that hugged her body and showed the lean muscles underneath that her baggy clothes always hid. She walked differently too, with confidence and power in every step, like she owned the night itself and everything in it feared her. Ji-ho hid behind a tree and watched as a black SUV pulled up to the curb, and Seo Yeon climbed inside without hesitation, and the vehicle disappeared into the darkness like it had never existed at all. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind was racing with questions that he did not have answers to. And he knew that he should forget what he saw and move on with his life, like a normal person would. But Ji-ho was not normal when it came to curiosity, and he had a bad habit of pulling on threads until everything unraveled around him. He went back to his room and opened his laptop, and he started searching for anything that might explain what he had just witnessed. And after hours of digging through forums and websites, he stumbled upon something that made his blood run cold. It was a dark web forum where criminals talked about their business, and Ji-ho had accessed it through a guide he found online. And what he read there changed everything he thought he knew about the world. There were threads about human trafficking operations across Asia, about girls being kidnapped and sold like products, about networks that operated in the shadows of society and destroyed innocent lives every single day. And in those threads, there was fear, real fear that Jiho could feel even through the screen of his computer. They whispered about someone they called the Dia librarian, a hunter who tracked human traffickers across Asia and destroyed their operations with brutal efficiency. And nobody knew who this person was because nobody had ever seen their face and lived to describe it. She moves like a ghost, one post said, and when she finds you, there is no escape and no mercy. I heard she killed 12 men in Bangkok last year, another post said, and the police found them arranged in a circle like some kind of warning to others. The librarian is not human, a third post said. She is death itself wearing human skin and hunting us in the night. Jiho closed his laptop and sat in the darkness of his room, and his hands were shaking so badly that he had to press them against his legs to make them stop. Thought about the quiet girl who sat in the back of his classes, the one who spoke so softly and seemed so fragile and shy, the one nobody noticed or remembered. He thought about the woman he had seen tonight, the one who moved like a predator and climbed into a black SUV at 2 in the morning, like she was going to war, and he wondered if they were the same person. And if so, what did that mean for him now that he had seen what he had seen? The sun was starting to rise outside his window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And Jiho knew that he would not be able to sleep tonight or maybe ever again because he had seen something he was not supposed to see. And he had a terrible feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could not even imagine. Quiet girl on campus was hiding something dark and dangerous. And Jiho had just taken the first step down a path that would lead him into the shadows where monsters hunted other monsters, and there was no turning back now. 10 years ago, Yoon Seo-yeon was just a normal 12-year-old girl who loved books and dreamed of becoming a writer someday. And she had a younger sister named Seo-jin, who was only 8 years old and followed her everywhere like a little shadow. Their family had gone on vacation to Thailand during the summer holiday, and everything was perfect until the night when everything fell apart and Seo-yeon's world shattered into a million pieces that could never be put back together. Seo-jin had wandered away from the hotel pool for just 5 minutes, and when Seo-yeon went to find her, her sister was gone like she had never existed at all. The police searched for weeks, but they found nothing. And the investigators told her parents that thousands of children disappeared in Southeast Asia every year, taken by trafficking networks that operated like ghosts in the night. Seo-yeon remembered her mother screaming until her voice broke. And she remembered her father sitting in silence with eyes that had died, even though his body was still alive. They never found Seo-jin, and the family returned to Korea broken and empty. And nothing was ever the same again. Her mother fell into a depression so deep that she could not climb out. And she passed away 3 years later from an illness that the doctor said was physical, but Seo-yeon knew was really a broken heart. Her father, a former military intelligence officer, changed after that, and he became obsessed with finding out what happened to his daughter. And he spent every waking moment researching trafficking networks and hunting for any trace of Seo-jin. He trained Seo-yeon, taught her how to fight with her hands and with weapons, how to track people through cities and jungles, how to interrogate someone until they told her everything she wanted to know, and how to survive in a world that was darker and more dangerous than most people could ever imagine. The world is full of monsters, he told her one night when she was 16. And someone has to hunt them because if we do not, they will keep taking innocent children and destroying innocent lives forever. He died of cancer when Seo-yeon was 18, and she sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand as he took his last breath. And she promised him that she would continue his work until her own last breath came now. 10 years after losing her sister, Seo Yan was one of the most feared hunters in Asia, and criminals whispered her name in the dark, like she was a demon that would come for them in their nightmares on this night. She sat in a small apartment across the city from her university dormitory, and she stared at the encrypted message on her burner phone with cold and focused eyes. 15 women being moved through Bizenport in 48 hours, the message said. Container ship called Eastern Promise, Dock 7. Midnight on Thursday, she memorized the information and then destroyed the phone by crushing it with her hands and burning the pieces in the sink. Because she never kept anything that could be traced back to her. The glasses came off, and the shy bookworm disappeared. And in her place stood a hunter who had saved hundreds of lives and ended 17 others with her own hand. She drove to a warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, where 2 people were waiting for her in a room filled with maps and computers and weapons. Detective Moon was 53 years old, a former police officer who had quit the force after realizing that the system was too slow and too weak to stop the monsters who preyed on the innocent. And he now spent his life gathering intelligence for Seo Yan and others like her. Dr. Beek, who was 41 years old, a trauma surgeon who had seen too many trafficking victims die on her operating table. And she had decided that preventing the trauma was better than trying to fix it afterward. 15 women, Detective Moon said, his voice heavy with anger and sadness, most of them probably teenagers, being shipped overseas to be sold like animals. The Eastern Promise is owned by a shell company connected to Chairman Wang, Dr. Beek added. He is one of the biggest traffickers in East Asia, and he has been untouchable for 20 years because he has connections in the government and the police. Seo Yan studied the maps and the photographs on the table, and her mind was already planning the operation, calculating the angles and the risks and the best way to get those women out alive. I will need blueprints of the dock area, she said, and information about how many guards Wang usually sends with his shipments. Already working on it, Detective Moon said, and he looked at her with eyes that held both admiration and concern. But Seo Yan, this one is bigger than usual, and I am worried that you are taking on too much alone. I am never alone, she said, and she did not smile, but there was warmth in her voice. I have you and Dr. Beek, and that is enough. What none of them knew was that someone was watching from the shadows outside the warehouse, and that someone was a young man named Kan Ji-ho who had followed. Seo Yan, here after seeing her leave campus again at midnight. Ji-ho hid behind a stack of shipping containers, and his heart was beating so loud that he was sure someone would hear it. And he watched as Seo Yan and 2 older people talked inside the warehouse through a dirty window. Then he heard voices approaching from another direction, and he pressed himself flat against the cold metal of the container. And he watched as 3 men with guns entered the warehouse district. They were not there for a Seo Yan. He realized they were there for someone else. Some kind of criminal business that had nothing to do with what he had been investigating. But then things went wrong very fast. One of the men spotted Ji-ho hiding in the shadows, and he shouted something to his companions. And suddenly guns were being pointed in his direction. Naja ran. But he did not get far before a hand grabbed his collar and threw him to the ground. And he looked up to see a man with a scar on his face pointing a gun at his head. Who are you? The man demanded. And why are you spying on us? Before Ji-ho could answer, something happened that he would never forget for the rest of his life. Seo Yan appeared out of the darkness like she had materialized from thin air, and she moved faster than any human being Ji-ho had ever seen in less than 30 seconds. She had disarmed all 3 men and left them unconscious on the ground. And her movements were so precise and so brutal that Ji-ho could not even process what he had just witnessed. She stood over the fallen men with blood splattered on her face. And when she turned to look at Ji-ho, her expression was completely calm, like she had just finished doing something as ordinary as washing dishes. You should not have followed me, she said. And her voice was cold and flat and nothing like the soft whisper she used on campus. Jiho could not speak, could not move, could not do anything except stare at the quiet girl from his university who had just destroyed 3 armed men like they were nothing at all. And he knew in that moment that his life would never be the same again. The next morning, Jiho sat in the university library trying to study, but his hands would not stop shaking and his mind kept replaying the images from last night over and over again. He saw Seo Yan moving through the darkness like a ghost. He saw the men falling one by one. He saw the blood on her face and the emptiness in her eyes. And he wondered if he had imagined the whole thing, but the bruise on his shoulder where he had hit the ground was real. And the fear in his stomach was real. And when he looked up from his book, the quiet girl herself was standing right in front of him. "We need to talk," Seo Yeon said. And her voice was soft like always, but there was something underneath it now. Something hard and sharp that Jiho had never noticed before. She sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table. And her oversized glasses and plain clothes made her look like any other student. But Jiho knew better now. "How much did you see?" she asked. "Everything," he said. And his voice came out as a whisper. "I saw you fight those men. I saw you move like something that is not human. And I've been reading about someone called the Librarian on the internet." Seo Yeon was silent for a long moment, and her eyes studied his face like she was trying to read his thoughts. And Jiho felt like a mouse being examined by a cat who was deciding whether to eat it or let it go. "You have a choice," she finally said. "You can forget everything you saw and go back to your normal life. And I will make sure you are never involved in this again. Or you can learn the truth and carry that weight forever." "What does carrying that weight mean?" Jiho asked. "It means knowing that there are monsters in this world who steal children and sell human beings like products," she said. "It means knowing that the police and the government cannot stop them because they are too powerful and too connected. And it means knowing that people like me exist because we are the only thing standing between the innocent and the darkness." Jiho thought about his comfortable life, his wealthy parents, his plans to graduate and get a good job and live happily ever after, like everyone expected him to do. Then he thought about what he had read online, about children being taken from their families, about women being sold into slavery, about the suffering that happened every single day, while people like him looked the other way and pretended everything was fine. "I want to know the truth," he said. And his voice was stronger now. "I want to understand why you do what you do." Seo Yeon nodded like she had expected this answer. And she stood up from the table. "Come with me," she said. She drove him to a building on the edge of the city, a place that looked like an ordinary apartment complex from the outside, but was actually a safe house where rescued trafficking victims were being rehabilitated inside. Jiho met women and girls of all ages who were learning to live again after experiencing horrors that he could not even imagine. And social workers and counselors moved between them with gentle voices and patient hands. A young girl approached Seo Yeon, maybe 16 years old, with short hair and eyes that were too old for her face. And she grabbed Seo Yeon's hand and held it tight. "Ani," the girl said, and her voice trembled with emotion. "I did not think you would come today. I am so happy to see you." Seo Yeon's face softened in a way that Jiho had never seen before, and she hugged the girl gently and stroked her hair. "Minji," Seo Yeon said. "How are you doing today? Are you eating well and sleeping better?" "Yes." "Because of you," Minji said. "Because you saved me 3 months ago. And every day I wake up and I remember that I am free because you came for me." Jiho watched this interaction with tears forming in his eyes. And he understood now why Seo Yeon did what she did, why she risked her life hunting monsters in the darkness. Because of girls like Minji, because of the lives that could be saved. because someone had to fight for the people who could not fight for themselves after they left the safe house. Seo Yeon drove Ji-ho to a quiet park where they sat on a bench and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold. "I have killed people," she said quietly, 17 people in 4 years. And every single one of them was a monster who would have continued destroying lives if I had not stopped them. "Do you regret it?" Ji-ho asked. "I regret that it was necessary," she said. "I do not enjoy killing, and I never kill unless there is absolutely no other option. But I have accepted that some people cannot be stopped any other way." "What happened to you?" Ji-ho asked. "What made you become this person?" Seo Yeon told him about her sister, about the vacation in Thailand, about the night when her family was destroyed and her childhood ended. And Ji-ho listened with a heavy heart as he finally understood the pain that drove her. "My father trained me to hunt the people who took Seo Jin," she said. "And even though I never found her, I can save others. I can prevent other families from experiencing the same pain that destroyed mine." Before Ji-ho could respond, Seo Yin's phone buzzed with a message, and when she read it, her face went pale and her jaw tightened with anger. "What is wrong?" Ji-ho asked. She showed him the screen, and his blood ran cold when he saw what was on it. It was a photograph of Seo Yeon walking across the university campus, taken from a distance by someone with a long lens camera. And underneath the photo was a simple message. "Found you? Librarian, Chairman Wang knows who I am," Seo Yeon said. And her voice was calm, but Ji-ho could hear the tension underneath. "My cover is compromised, and he will send people to kill me. What are you going to do?" Ji-ho asked. His voice filled with fear for her. Seo Yeon stood up from the bench and looked out at the setting sun. And when she turned back to Ji-ho, her eyes were cold and hard like steel. "I am going to end this," she said, "once and for all." Detective Moon told Seo Yeon to run, to disappear into one of the safe countries where Chairman Wang's reach could not find her, and to start a new life under a new name. "You have saved hundreds of people," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "You have done more than anyone could ever ask, and you deserve to live in peace now." But Seo Yeon shook her head, and her eyes held a fire that would not be extinguished if I run. "Wang will keep operating," she said. "He will keep stealing girls and destroying families and spreading his poison across Asia. And everything I've worked for will mean nothing. So, what are you going to do?" Dr. Beek asked. "I am going to make him come to me," Seo Yeon said. "And then I am going to tear his empire down piece by piece until there is nothing left." Chairman Wang was one of the most powerful criminals in East Asia, a man who had built his fortune on human suffering and protected it with bribes and violence for more than 2 decades. And he did not take kindly to threats when he learned that the librarian was a young university student named Yoon Seo Yeon. He laughed at first because he could not believe that a small girl had caused him so much trouble. Then he sent his best enforcer to deal with her. The man was known only as the Butcher, and he had earned his nickname through years of brutal work that left bodies scattered across 3 countries. And when Wang told him to bring the librarian to him alive, he smiled with anticipation. "I want her conscious," Wang said. "I want to look into her eyes while I show her what happens to people who interfere with my business." Seo Yeon knew they were coming, but she refused to change her routine because she wanted them to think. She was afraid and hiding. She went to her classes like always, sat in the back corner with her oversized glasses, spoke softly when professors called on her, and pretended to be the invisible girl that everyone thought she was. Ji-ho was terrified for her, and he tried to convince her to at least let him help. But she refused. "This is not your fight," she said, "and I will not let you get hurt because of me." "How can you be so calm?" he demanded. "There are killers coming for you, and you act like nothing is wrong." Seo Yeon looked at him with eyes that held no fear. Only a cold determination that made Jiho shiver. Fear is a luxury, she said. And I gave it up a long time ago. 3 nights later, they came for her. Seo Yeon was walking back to her apartment from the convenience store, carrying a bag with instant noodles and coffee. When 4 men emerged from the shadows and surrounded her, they were professionals, armed with knives and stun guns. And they moved to block every escape route with practiced precision. The librarian, the leader said. And he smiled like a wolf that had cornered a rabbit. Chairman Wang sends his regards. Seo Yeon set down her grocery bag and removed her glasses, folding them carefully and placing them in her pocket. Tell Chairman Wang that I am coming for him, she said, and her voice was no longer soft. And tell him that what I am about to do to you is just a preview. The fight lasted 90 seconds. Yeon moved like water and struck like lightning, using a pen from her pocket and a ceramic coffee mug from her grocery bag as weapons. And the men fell one by one with screams that echoed through the empty street. 3 of them died before they hit the ground. Their throats opened or their temples shattered, and the 4th was left alive on purpose, crawling on the concrete with broken legs and terror in his eyes. Yeon knelt beside him and grabbed his face with bloody hands. Deliver my message, she said. Tell Wang that the librarian is done hiding, and that I am coming for everything he has built. She let him go and walked away without looking back. And the survivor dragged himself to a phone and called for help while crying like a child. The next day, Detective Moon was shot. He was leaving his apartment when a man on a motorcycle drove past and fired 3 bullets into his chest. And by the time the ambulance arrived, he had lost half the blood in his body. Darbeek operated on him for 7 hours, fighting to repair the damage and keep him alive. And when she finally emerged from the surgery room, her face was exhausted but relieved. He will live, she told Seo Yeon. But it was close, too close. Seo Yeon sat by Moon's hospital bed all night, holding his hand and watching the machines beep with his heartbeat. And for the first time in years, tears fell down her cheeks. Jiho found her there at dawn, crying silently while the man who had been like a father to her lay unconscious and broken because of her war. This is my fault, she whispered. Everyone I care about gets hurt because of what I do, and I do not know how much longer I can keep going. She told Jiho things she had never told anyone, about how tired she was, about how she sometimes forgot what her sister's voice sounded like, about how she wondered if she had become a monster herself while hunting monsters. You are not a monster, Jiho said firmly. Monsters destroy innocent lives, and you save them. And there is a difference, even if you cannot see it right now. Seo Yeon wiped her tears and looked at Detective Moon's sleeping face. And something hardened inside her, something cold and final. Wang thinks he can break me by hurting the people I love, she said. And her voice was empty of emotion now. But all he has done is remind me why I started this fight in the first place. She stood up and walked toward the door. And Jiho called after her. Where are you going? She did not turn around, but her answer chilled him to the bone. To end this war, she said, once and for all, and then she disappeared into the morning light. And Jiho knew that the next time he saw her, everything would be different. Chairman Wang's estate was a fortress of wealth and power located in the mountains outside Seoul, surrounded by walls and cameras and guards who would kill anyone who tried to enter without permission. But tonight, the fortress was full of guests, because Wang's daughter was getting married, and hundreds of the most powerful people in Korea had come to celebrate. Politicians who took his bribes, businessmen who laundered his money, police chiefs who looked the other way while he destroyed innocent lives. They were all there eating expensive food and drinking expensive wine while a string quartet played beautiful music, and somewhere among the servers carrying Teresa Champagne was a young woman with her hair pulled back and her face hidden behind a mask of calm professionalism. Jan had spent 3 days preparing for this infiltration, studying the layout of the estate, memorizing the patrol patterns of the guards, and obtaining a server's uniform through contacts she had cultivated over years of work. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible and unremarkable, just another servant in a sea of servants that the wealthy guests did not even see as human beings. Her target was Wang himself, the man whose organization had stolen thousands of children over 20 years. The man whose network had almost certainly been responsible for her sister's disappearance so long ago. She found him in his private study on the 3rd floor, separated from the party by thick walls and soundproof doors, sitting behind a massive desk made of wood that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. He looked up when she entered, and his face showed annoyance at being disturbed. "I did not order any champagne," he said. "Get out." Seo Yan set down her tray and removed her server's jacket, and when she looked at Wang, his face went pale as he recognized the eyes of the woman who had haunted his nightmares for months. "Hello, Chairman Wang," she said. "I told you I was coming." He reached for the panic button under his desk, but Seo Yan was faster, crossing the room in 2 steps and pinning his hand to the wood with a knife she had hidden in her sleeve. Wang screamed, but the soundproof walls swallowed his voice, and no one at the party below had any idea what was happening. "Please," he begged, and tears streamed down his face. "I will give you anything, money, power, protection. Just tell me what you want, and it is yours." Seo Yan pulled a photograph from her pocket and placed it on the desk in front of him. A picture of a smiling 8-year-old girl with pigtails and missing front teeth. Her name was Yoon Seo Jin, she said. "She was taken from a hotel in Thailand 15 years ago, and my investigation has confirmed that your organization was responsible." Wang looked at the photograph with confusion and fear in his eyes. "I do not remember," he said. "There have been so many over the years. I cannot remember every single one." And that was the worst thing he could have said, because it proved what Seo Yan had always known, that her sister's life meant nothing to this man, that she was just another product to be sold and forgotten. "You destroyed my family," Seo Yan said, and her voice was calm even though fire burned in her heart. "You took my sister and broke my parents and turned me into what I am today. And you do not even remember her name." She pulled the knife from his hand, and Wang screamed again, clutching his wounded palm against his chest. "I am going to kill you," he gasped. "My men will hunt you down and make you suffer for this." "No," Seo Yan said. "They will not." She pulled out her phone and showed him the screen, and Wang's face went from pale to gray as he saw what she had done. Every file, every record, every piece of evidence documenting his 20 years of criminal activity had been uploaded to news stations, law enforcement agencies, and rival organizations across Asia simultaneously. His financial records showing bribes to politicians, his shipping manifests showing human cargo, his communications with corrupt officials. Everything was now public knowledge, spreading across the internet like wildfire. His phone started buzzing with notifications. Dozens and then hundreds of messages from panicked associates and betrayed allies who were watching their world collapse in real time. "My empire," Wang whispered, and his voice was broken and empty. "You have destroyed everything." "No," Seo Yan said. "I have exposed what you are, and now the world will destroy you. And you will spend the rest of your life in a prison cell, knowing that everyone knows your crimes." She turned and walked toward the door, and Wang called after her with desperate rage. "Why are you not killing me?" he screamed. "After everything I've done, why are you letting me live?" Seo Yan paused at the door and looked back at him with cold eyes. "Because death would be too easy," she said. You will live with your shame and your failure for many years. And every day you will remember that a quiet girl on a university campus brought down everything you built. She walked out into the night, past the panicking guests who were checking their phones and realizing what was happening, past the guards who were abandoning their posts as sirens approached in the distance, past the beautiful gardens and the expensive decorations that would soon be evidence in a criminal trial, and she disappeared into the darkness. Just like she always did 1 year later, Seo Yeon graduated from university and opened a small bookstore in a quiet neighborhood of Seoul. A place with warm lighting and comfortable chairs where people could escape from the world for a little. Lee Ji-ho worked there part-time between his graduate studies, organizing shelves and making coffee, and pretending he did not know that the quiet owner had once been the most feared hunter in Asia. Detective Moon visited every week, walking with a cane now but still gathering intelligence, because even though Wang was in prison, there were always more monsters hiding in the shadows. The bookstore had a back room with computers and maps and secure communication equipment, because Seo Yeon still hunted sometimes when cases were too urgent or too important to ignore, but less often now, because she had trained others to continue the work. Young people who had seen the darkness and chosen to fight it instead of looking away. On this particular evening, a young woman entered the bookstore with red eyes and trembling hands, and she approached Seo Yeon at the counter with desperation written across her face. "Please," the woman said, "my daughter has been missing for 3 days, and the police say they cannot help. But I heard that you might be able to find her." Seo Yeon looked at this mother with compassion born from understanding, because she knew exactly what it felt like to lose someone you loved to the darkness. She walked to the front door and locked it, flipping the sign from open to closed, and then she turned back to the woman with eyes that held strength and determination and a promise. "Tell me everything," she said, and somewhere in the city, in the shadows where monsters hid and innocent people suffered, the words spread like whispers on the wind. The librarian was still hunting, and she always would be.